Ever since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated by Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. I think there's a lot of amazing concepts in that story. But when I saw that Alice got a legendary card in Sapphire, I really wanted to try to make it work. And after some experiments, I think I've settled on Amber Sapphire being the color combination to try to accomplish this. As you saw from the opening clip, one of the best ways to boost Alice to 10 strength is using the Queen Commanding Presence. When this card quests, if Alice is already on field, the Queen will also have the support ability, which means you can transfer the Queen's inherent 4 strength over to Alice, bringing her up to 5 strength total, and then you can trigger the Queen's inherent effect of boosting a character by 4 and reducing another one by 4, but that gives Alice another 4 strength, giving her a total of 9 strength from just questing with the Queen once. If you have a small Queen and an Alice on board, surprising your opponent with a shifted Queen and then questing with it can instantly pump up your Alice to 9 strength immediately. Then all you need is one other character on board to quest, which, as you can see on the screen here from the deck list, we have plenty, and that 1 strength transfers to Alice because it has support, and your Alice is instantly at 10 strength. Now, if you have 2 Alices on board, this is where things get absolutely crazy because each one gives the other support. Then you can just transfer that massive amount of strength over to the second Alice or anything else. Now, the Alice combo can be pretty devastating because you can essentially set it all up on turn 5 for a turn 6 win, as you saw in the opening clip there. And if you are paying attention to what the meta is, you know that turn 6 means the opponent doesn't get to turn 7, which is no Be Prepared. However, this deck I wouldn't say is the most competitive. I would actually categorize it more as casual, but it can definitely still do work against some pretty powerful decks in the meta, and it is a very fun deck to play. But let's explore what else the deck is capable of. So as you see on screen here, we have a number of different support cards, and I call them advantage generating cards. I really wanted to try to make Sisu work, and because we're playing some cards we really want to protect, like the Hiram and the Alice and even the Snow White, I wanted to make that work as well. I opted to throw in Sisu and Snow White because we're playing bodyguards, and all you need is a Simba or a Maximus on board, and your Snow White or Sisu should be able to quest pretty freely, being protected from something like a Madame Mim Fox early on, and while Maximus does still get outed by Maui, at least it prevents them from throwing it directly into the Sisu or the Snow White, meaning hopefully you can get some advantage off of them more than once and generate some nice card advantage that way. Of course, you still have the Hiram engine with Popsicles, Scepters for additional support if you don't see Alice right away, and Fishbone Quills to ramp. And again, with a lot of the draw and recursion that you have in the deck, you should have no problem increasing your hand and then using some of that for Fishbone Quill if you need it. The Cogsworth is also kind of interesting here because the resist 1 on like a Sisu makes it so that it would survive against the Madame Mim Fox, which is one of the main reasons why Sisu isn't so good right now, is because it just loses to Madame Mim Fox. And then we also have some heavy hitters like the Surfer Stitch, the Hades to deal with threats, and I've opted to include Tamatoa. Not sure how I feel about it yet, but you know, in certain scenarios, this card can just drop and win you the game. And if you have an Alice on board, it is 5 strength that gets transferred over to anything, which is pretty big. But there might be some better options. But for right now, I'm just testing out the Tamatoa. And Let It Go's, again, mostly ink, but in the very critical situations where you actually need to let it go a threat, it is there. And the rest of the deck is pretty self-explanatory. If you do get a Snow White or a Sisu off a few times, the advantage can be pretty significant, and you can build a pretty wide board that is very hard to deal with. And as you can probably tell on screen here, this deck can deal with steel very well because you have a lot of high toughness characters and you have Cogsworth, which has resist. The weakness of this deck, I would say, is definitely Ruby Amethyst, which is probably the most common deck in the format right now. I've made a couple of videos on it being tier 0, but the Ruby cards being able to just outright remove stuff makes it a little hard for this deck to play around. That being said, you do play a number of aggro threats like the Noi early on that you can put out on field. Your Alice, obviously, that you get put out also helps you deal with threats on board because everything that you quest with will have support, so you can beef up characters to take out other characters. And like I said, if you don't see an Alice, you hopefully have a Scepter, which is a 1-drop item that you can also use to help deal with boards. So the deck is very oddly like, it works. I don't know how else to say it, even though it seems like it's just a random pile of cards thrown together. And while it is mostly Sapphire, the Amber cards I think do provide enough advantage for you to warrant playing them. Like Surfer Stitch has really fallen off in use, but just the fact it's a 4/8 body makes it extremely hard to deal with any other combination. And the fact that you can pump the Surfer Stitch up to like you know, 6, 7, 8, 9 strength, it can basically run over anything and still survive with that 8 toughness, right? So there is a lot of unique things you can do with this deck, and I think that's why this color pairing works well. But enough talk, let's go ahead and jump into some more matches. Before I get into a full match, I just wanted to show you again the explosive power of this deck, and unless your opponent has straight up like removal or has a way to constantly be removing your threats on the board, this is kind of the end result where you just go so wide, and with the Alice's surviving for a turn and being able to quest now, you're just going to instantly end the game no matter what lore you're at, because you're obviously going to hit over 20 lore in just like a single turn with all these characters on board supporting each other and providing the strength boost to Alice. And so you just end the game super quick once this setup is established. So in this first matchup here, we want to go as much on curve as possible, so we start off by inking the Queen and playing our Scepter as our 1-drop item, which will come into play for our Hiram later on. I think I skipped over the opponent's first couple of inks because they were thinking a while and they would ink and then think some more and then, you know, do what they have to do. So I apologize for that. But you can see here that they are on Steel, and I guess it wasn't revealed yet until later that they are also on Amethyst. So Steel Amethyst is one of the more meta decks in the format, I would say, and you're going to see how this deck is able to deal with this color combination. So we're at the moment just trying to do our best to generate some advantage by playing a couple of items, setting up for the Hiram, which again is kind of slow. We draw into 2 uninkables, and this unfortunately means we have to ink our Alice in order to play our Popsicle and just kind of continue to generate a decent board size. The opponent keeps up with advantage though by singing Friends on the other side. They ink a Benja, which in my opinion is pretty smart, because unless you really think Scepter is going to be a problem, the Benja you kind of realize isn't going to do enough against an item deck, air quotes, which is probably what they think this is. Well, I mean, they've seen Amber, so maybe not. But yeah, Benja just wouldn't be too impactful because the Hiram is still going to trigger and I will have more items, right? But with the Scepter, we are able to boost our Noi, and if I wanted to, I could take out the Maleficent to prevent them from singing another Friend on the other side. I decided to ink my second Hiram because at this point, I don't think nothing that the opponent can drop will really deal with my Hiram on board. Even if they had a Fox, they would have to bounce back their Tiana in order to use the Maleficent and the Fox to take out the Hiram, which, you know, I don't think is really a good use of their resources, and I doubt they do that. They make a very odd play here in Fire the Cannons and smashing 2 separate targets and then not challenging either one. And then I'm able to generate the necessary advantage off of the Sisu here in order to kind of just get some combos rolling, generate some advantage by drawing, and then use the support on the Scepter to boost one of my characters. I thought I boosted the Noi for some reason, and I make a really amateur mistake. You know, this is what happens when you don't play properly in sequence. You kind of forget what you did, and I forgot that my Queen actually had the boost. I could have played the Alice, used the Queen to quest, and then put the boost onto the Noi if I really wanted to. But yeah, in the end, I just used Queen to take out the Tiana, leaving the Maleficent. Then the opponent reveals kind of what they were thinking, I guess. They did have a Grab Your Swords, which wipes out most of my board here, but we do still retain our Hiram that is tapped down. They're going to fire the cannons to finish it off, so they had a bunch of uninkables in hand, and it kind of explains their limited play. I guess in hindsight, smash and fire the cannons on 2 separate targets made sense for the follow-up, but the fact that I could have used Popsicles to heal my characters and I still got the advantage off of each of them makes that kind of an underwhelming play in the end. And at this point, I'm going to happily just use Alice to take out the Maleficent and then use Popsicle to heal it back up, because look at the resource game right now between my opponent and I. And yeah, they're clearly sitting on a lot of uninkables here. All they can do is grab your swords and pass. So now we're going to go ahead and drop a Tamatoa, and you can see this deck just, you know, out muscles Steel. Like the Grab Your Swords does almost nothing with the Cogsworth on board now, providing resist 1 to every other character, and just our high toughness in general. Alice is a 1-4 for 3, for example, just is too much for the opponent to handle there. In this video, you're going to see us attempt to go wide and how we kind of deal with opponents' boards and clean them up a little bit. So to start off, we have a turn 1 Popsicle, which is always nice. The opponent answers that with a turn 1 Lilo, and I'm just like, okay, if they have turn 2 Simba, this could be a little bit of an aggro problem for us, since our Noi won't be able to cut through that Simba without us having the Maximus on board. The good news is Fishbone Quill on turn 3 will allow us to Maximus on turn 4. Again, it's still a little slow, but the opponent isn't going to get too far ahead. They actually forget to put their Simba in bodyguard mode, which prevents them from getting the 2 lore off of Lilo, so they don't quest with it, so that they don't lose the Lilo to the Noi for free. Again, a misclick or something, but in the end, it's not going to make a single difference. Just pretend the opponent has the 2 lore right now. Like, you're going to see it doesn't make a difference at all. On turn 3, though, they are going to drop their own Popsicle, draw a card, ink, and I think they play a second Simba here. Yep. And they're looking pretty strong here, right? We've got some items and we're playing pretty slow, but our end game is going to look really strong because we have the Sisu and we have the Maximus bodyguard, and some decks just straight up have a really tough time dealing with Maximus. I recently bought 4 Maximus because they were really cheap, and I'm like, yeah, just seeing this card in practical use, I'm a big fan. I was a fan of it when it came out, but it was kind of overpriced in my opinion, but now that it's dropped so much, I definitely went and picked up a playset for super cheap. So here you can see our Noi getting a ton of advantage here, taking out the Simba, and they can't even challenge my Noi with 1 damage on it with their own Simba because it's protected by the Maximus. So you can see the value that Maximus has here. The opponent has nothing to deal with this Maximus, so all they can do is continue to quest, and again, if they didn't forget to quest with the Lilo or put the Simba in bodyguard mode and get the extra 2 lore off the Lilo, they would be at 12. It doesn't make a difference. So at this board state, we're going to be able to Maximus take out their opponent's Simba and ink our second Maximus in order to drop the Stitch Surfer, draw 2, and then Sisu, instead of questing, will actually take out the Lilo. We quest with the Noi for 2, and it's 10 to 7 lore, and we have 4 characters to the opponent's 1. There's nothing really that they can do to claw back with this color combination if you don't go wide. And I guess you can look at this as a strength and a weakness of this color, in that if you end up getting this far, the opponent really does need a board wipe, otherwise they just lose. But if you end up getting your board outed, it can be really hard to try to rebuild. But in the end here, you can see just, yeah, there's no way the opponent can kind of claw their way back, and they're just going to end up surrendering here. So that was a GG. If you've enjoyed these videos, please drop a like and check out the deck list linked in the description and or pinned in the comments for the Dreamborn link. And again, let me know in the comment section if you want to see more of this deck gameplay from me, and I'll be happy to post more follow-up videos with this deck because it is fun to play. But that's going to go ahead and wrap up this video. If you made it this far, thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.